I'm Nurse Jessica Seitz, along with Nurse Erica. We're Nurses Uncorked, the podcast that takes nursing facts with nursing comedy and makes a little cocktail out of it. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Nurses Uncorked. This is Nurse Jessica Seitz, your host, along with my co-host, Nurse Erica, the lovely Nurse Erica. And we have a special guest with us today that I'm super excited about. So without saying who he is, I'm going to give a little intro and see if you guys can figure out who we have on today. This gentleman is a world-renowned psychic medium, stars of such hit TV shows as Crossing Over and John Edward Cross Country, a New York Times best-selling author of many books. I hope I've done my homework good here. Has read for many celebrities, has sat down with Oprah, Kim Kardashian, just to say the least. And in my mind is one of the most accomplished and amazing psychic mediums ever of all time. And I am so excited and thankful to have John Edward on our podcast today. Thank you, John, for joining us. How was that intro, John?
Thank you.
That was amazing, Jessica, Erica.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very happy to be here and listen to the conversation and be a part of it. And I come out of healthcare, so this feels like I'm coming home.
Yes.
Yeah.
We
We
know
love
that.
that you have a
That's-
background in healthcare. Phlebotomy, right?
I did. Well, so while I was in an accelerated program for getting a master's degree where it was like a hybrid of doing your bachelor's and your master's for healthcare and public administration.
Okay.
And I decided that I wanted to, get my foot in the door of the hospital, and I started working as a phlebotomist in the lab. Loved it, absolutely loved the patient care. And then came the decision, like, I got to make this transition into administration. So I moved over to another department that was more admin, and then moved into the IT department and absolutely hated it. Like,
Right.
I missed the
Of course.
patient interaction in such a big way. But yeah, my background is in healthcare, so it's like my behind the scenes passion. And during the pandemic, when I was expressing concerns about people's health and safety and well-being, and kind of a hybrid of my intuitive side meeting my logical trained side, I had a lot of people telling me, like, you need to stay in your lane, and just like, you just talk to dead people. And people got a chance to see a very different side of me, where I was not as spiritual as one might gather, because I started amplifying and kind of trying to help boost some of the folks that were trying to raise awareness when it came to healthcare.
I've heard some of those. In fact, you did a podcast at the beginning of the year for New Year's, and you made some 2023 predictions that were spot on and really kind of centered on healthcare workers, which we so appreciate.
Yes.
I know
that.
you said COVID is not over. This was 10
Nope.
months ago. You made that prediction.
Yep.
And you said nurses and healthcare workers are rising up. We're not going to
Mhm.
take care of 50 patients anymore. It's all about the number of patients, and that we will eventually win because we're putting humanity first. I can't tell you how much I love that. And you're absolutely right. We have seen an unprecedented amount of nursing strikes, for example. We are rising up. And I hope that your latter prediction is true with putting humanity first.
I think that's the need. And you're referring to the Maria Menounos podcast that I did
Yes.
in January. And I literally, Erica, just said the other day, I go, wow, it's like, I'm surprised people haven't brought up some of the stuff that I had said. Not that I was, not from an egotistical standpoint, but just like from a, like, this is happened, like it's happening. I said it was going to be a year of accountability. And I feel like people in the world of celebrity are also being held accountable in various different places. Like, people don't care about your Louis Vuitton bag or your, fashion
Right.
show, or they don't really care about the things that they did, because we're having real everyday humanity type issues that are taking place. So thank you for actually saying that. And I do believe that we have to put humanity first, and that's where that was coming from.
Yeah, I was very impressed with that. You also said don't fall for the empathy manipulation, which is a term that I use all the time when I'm coaching nurses, because that is actually something that we are accosted with on a daily basis, the empathy manipulation. I love
Yeah,
that
so
you get it.
well,
Mhm.
I experienced it, so I completely understand. I used to suffer, so I'll take the two worlds and bring it together. I suffered from strep throat throughout my childhood. I mean, it was a ongoing thing that strep throat was something that was a really big deal for me. And they didn't know why. They were trying to figure out, why did he keep getting this? Like, where was this coming from? Should we take his tonsils? Should we not take his tonsils? And Penn VK 500 was like, it was like, here's your script. Like, this was how it would go. When I was working in the hospital, the lab manager at the time was a woman named Marianne, and she said, I feel like it's important that we get them out. She says, because you're always struggling with this. She goes, so you come in the morning, do the morning rounds. She says that I'll walk you over to day op. She says, and you can then, you can get the tonsils out in day op.
Just
And
like
I
that.
looked at her just like that. But
Wow.
the level of I need you to do the 6 and 7 o'clock blood draws first, and then we'll
Oh,
then we'll
of
get you over
course.
to day op.
Of course.
Like the priority was making sure, because I was fast. So it
Mm-hmm.
was like taking me out of the rotation would be bad. So I was like, yeah, no, I think I'm going to keep my tonsils, but thank you for your compassion. Like, thank you for
I'm
that.
surprised they even wanted to give you the time to do that. Normally they'd be
Yeah.
like,
Well,
hang in there, hang in there.
I made the joke,
Wait
and
for
I was
your
like,
day off.
yeah, I
Mhm.
was like, do you want me to come back for 1,600 or 1,800 rounds, or like, am I good? Can I go home after I get my tonsils?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Kept them, by the way. But psychically, this is the area, your throat chakra is where actually clairaudience comes in. It's where information that you're getting psychically can come in. And when I met a medium by the name of Robert Brown, who's from London, and he said to me, he goes, you're very clairaudient. And I went, I am. He goes, well, those strep throats must have been a bitch for you growing up. And I was
Oh,
like,
That's
wow.
crazy.
yeah.
I had that. I got my tonsils out actually in my early 30s finally, because
Ugh.
it continued for me. I was always either, they would say, between strep throat or tonsillitis. That was constantly my two diagnoses all the time. But back then they were so hesitant to take your tonsils out. Like they really, they wanted to keep them in there to help fight off infection, which obviously it wasn't doing. But
Yeah.
yeah, I can totally relate with that for sure.
No, I just wanted just to put a period there. Is I think that what healthcare workers have had to go through before the pandemic, working short or whatever the case may be, creating the energy of, if you call out, you're hurting your fellow coworker. If you call out, you're hurting your patient.
Mm-hmm.
I always remember thinking, well, hire more nurses, like
It's so
hire
simple.
other,
Pay them
hire more people.
appropriately, make it safe, and you will have all the nurses you need, but you have to be willing to pay for the nurses.
Well, and now in my world, when I'm doing a reading for somebody and I get a certain feeling about energy, I call it the teaching healing vibration. And a person who is a nurse or a person who is a teacher, to me, feels the same way, because they're giving so much of themselves to somebody else.
Yeah.
And I find
Interesting.
it interesting that both of those fields are the most underpaid, and they're giving the most of their time to help another person for the betterment of humanity.
And the female dominated professions that have been just kind of systematically victimized, right? Over the years. We have a lot in common, nurses and teachers, actually. Yeah.
Truly.
Yeah.
Well, I think
I
a
wanted
lot of us are. I
to
was going to say we're empathetic. Like we take on people's feelings, and that's
Yeah.
draining. Like we constantly are feeling how they feel. At least that is what I dealt with. Like I would always feel like they must be so sad right now, or this must be so stressful on them. So it's constantly like feeling how they're feeling, and it's on top of being stressed yourself. And it's at the end of the day, you're just exhausted. I mean, mentally, physically, just zapped. So it's tough. It can be tough
Yeah.
for sure.
If you will indulge me for a moment to fangirl just very briefly. I'm one of your OGs. So
OG
for
Erica.
the two or three people in the world that may not know who you are, these days, there's psychic mediums everywhere. But back in 2000, you were the pioneer. You were the first one to have a TV show syndicated worldwide, crossing over with John Edward. And I have been a loyal follower since then. The books, the show, everything. I've even seen one of your live shows when you came to Las Vegas back in 2019. And I wanted to share a story with you because I've always wondered if you knew what had happened at your show.
I can't wait to
So,
hear this.
I know, because I haven't told her. I just told her that I had a story I wanted to share with you. So, 1 year prior to your show, spring break 2018, 4 Las Vegas teenagers drove to California for spring break, Huntington Beach. They were hit head on by a drunk driver and
gosh.
pushed into oncoming traffic, and 3 of them died instantly. The other one was seriously injured. Fast forward 1 year, we are at your show. And as you can imagine, that kind of devastated the Las Vegas community, right? To have 4 teens like that all at once. So you're doing your readings, and towards the beginning of the show, you call on someone that's like back left of the audience, and you say something about, and I'm paraphrasing, of course, you lost someone too young, a son, and I'm getting a car accident, and, no one thinks anything of it, but you can tell that these are probably the parents, and they're emotional and nodding and yes, 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 yes. 30 minutes later, whenever, you call on someone else in the audience, front right, nowhere near each other. Very similar. Something similar to the one over there. I'm getting something like that. The car accident.
Oh my gosh.
Too young. That maybe it was multiple, and it started coming together, and then there was a third, and there was an audible gasp in the audience because the locals, I think, immediately recognized what was going on, but none of those people, I think it was apparent, knew that the others were there, the other parents.
I have goosebumps.
And it was
all down
this
my leg.
aha moment. My daughter and I were
Wow.
there, and we didn't know any of these poor kids or their families, but as I said, it devastated the community. And there was this audible gasp where we all went, "Oh my God!" Like, they're all here.
It seems like all 3 of them came through.
No one knew that they were here, and you totally got it. You put it all together. Yeah.
That's crazy and beautiful in a tragic way.
Yeah.
Yes.
That would actually take place. It reminds me, I was in Brisbane, Australia, and we're going back probably about a decade. There were 2,000 people in this venue, and the venue, I always loved working at this specific place because it was set up just like Crossing Over, where it felt like the bleachers kind of like went up like that. And I made a connection with somebody who had passed in a car accident, and the girl that was coming through was telling her parents that she didn't pass alone, that there was a phenomenal paramedic who was with her the whole time, talking to her the whole time, listening to the whole time, and she wanted to say thank you to the paramedic. And can mom and dad let the paramedic know that she really appreciated her exit being so compassionate. So mom and dad were very, very emotional, and mom, they said, we don't know who it is. We wouldn't be able to do that. So I said, well, maybe there's a way, like maybe you can ask the hospital or ask whatever, and you can go that direction. And then I got pulled like a little bit back to my, like a few rows back to the left. And I said, somebody else here is connected to them. I go, do you guys know each other? And the person like raised their hands, like they got the mic to them and said, I'm the paramedic.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
So it happened at the event.
Yeah.
And there was this like moment which you're describing, and everybody in the room feels it. It's this just moment of like, whoa, like just whoa. And then that to me just shows me how there's just this like bigger kind of organization of what takes place in the universe, and nothing happens by chance or coincidence. And most importantly, like, what can we learn from these moments when it happens? Like, and there's multiple things I think that we can learn, about connection and about survival of consciousness, and that, we go on, but that's the other side of it. But what about this side of it? Like, well, what do we do? What do we do with that? Right? Like, how do we evolve through that? So we look at the validations that come in during the reading to help support the fact that there's a survival of consciousness. That's powerful, Erica. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, because I don't know these stories. Like, I don't remember them. I don't retain
you
them.
wouldn't, if you weren't in Las Vegas, you wouldn't have known.
That's amazing.
I've always
Um,
wondered
reg-
if you really knew. And I wanted to share that with
Now
you
he
because it
does.
was powerful. And I think it was very healing. It was apparent that it was very healing for all of them.
I'm
Yeah,
telling you, goosebumps everywhere when you told me that just now. I'm like, oh
yeah.
Yeah.
my, it's
After so
crazy.
many years of doing this, like this is now my 38th year of doing this. Like this is a long time.
Wow.
They, they're. I come from an old school when it comes to the subject matter. And old school of doing this is you get in, you do your job, you get out. You don't have a connection to the client. Social media kind of knocks down that wall a little bit where you are able to interact with people that you've read, where they can show you validations or tell you stuff after the fact. And it's still I have the old school mentality where it's kind of like I have to tell people, please don't volunteer. Thank you for trusting me, but please don't volunteer information because you may trust me and I've
Right.
earned your trust and thank you. But the 400 people who have created knockoff accounts who are going to read that and, now try to come at you and scam you out of money, you can't trust them. So it's a very interesting world that we're now living in because so much of the internet is amazing regarding community and so much of it is dangerous regarding community. We got to be careful.
Absolutely. Jessica, I think I cut you off earlier. You were going to say something.
It's okay. I'm just enjoying the podcast. Great time. I was just going to talk about one story that you shared that I had a little bit of a question about, but it went back to your phlebotomy days back in, I think it was
Hmm.
1990. And I love this story that I saw it on TikTok actually, but it was the one where they tried to keep you out of the room because the patient would remind you of your mom that had passed.
Yep.
And I hear a lot of you talking, well, for those that don't know, basically, without going into too much time, but John did end up having to go into the room to draw labs on a patient that um, did put him back into a space that reminded him a lot of what his mom had gone through when she was passing from cancer, which obviously was difficult, and had to draw her labs and whatnot. But I believe that you were at least comforted, even though you had to poke the woman. You were like, well, at least they're letting her son stay,
Yep.
the night. And you were like, that's really nice of them. It's after hours, you know. And as much as you were kind of disheartened that you did have to draw labs because you knew she was probably going to pass pretty soon, um, you told the nurse that at least he's there. At least she's got somebody. And that's when you guys had the realization, or she told you that no, there's nobody in the room.
Nobody in the room.
Now, my question to you is, I hear a lot of you saying about when you tune in, or when you get these frequencies, maybe as you describe it, or like you're having to up your level and they're
Hmm.
having to bring theirs down, where you can kind of meet in the middle, because I've listened to a lot of that. How often do you visually see something like that? Is it actually a visual phenomenon, like, and I just don't hear you talk about it that much? Is it like a rare thing, or I just want you to elaborate a little bit on
Sure.
that.
So in the beginning of my development, there would be moments where I would see things and I would see them in a flash, or I would see them quickly, or I would see them peripherally. And it takes a lot of their energy to lower their frequency to be able to do that. Once the development process kicked in and my other abilities kind of picked up and did some of the heavy lifting, that aspect of it went away. So I don't see people like that now. I don't see that in the way, but I wasn't reading that day. And it wasn't something that I was expecting to do. And I think because of the woman and the way she looked in the bed, because she looked like my mom. And it was less than a year that my mom had passed. I opened up emotionally.
uh
And because I opened up emotionally, I connected with the family. So indirectly, I made a connection with the woman's energy. And it was more an anger connection, because I didn't understand why they were drawing blood on this woman. I didn't understand why every 4 hours or whatever it was that she was having blood work drawn. Like, not
yeah,
that I'm
it's
a doctor,
frustrating.
not that I can make that call, but that was an insurance thing. That wasn't a that that wasn't a we need this result thing. It was more like
Right.
until the doctor DC'd the orders, you were gonna you had to do that. So when I walked in and I saw her, it just was like she had no vein. She was like
Yeah.
so thin. But sitting in the chair, I really peripherally saw what looked like a 17-year-old, and I was only now 20 at the time.
Wow.
So I kind of felt like, dude, like I'm like a little ahead of where you're at. Like that's what I wanted to say to him. Would never say that because I wouldn't want
Yeah.
to get in trouble. But I thought it, and then I felt like that it was cool that they let him stay because it was after hours, it was late. And the nurse looked at me like I was absolutely crazy. And she said that there was nobody else in the room. And I said,
Wow.
well, then he must have walked into the bathroom. And she said, I didn't. I emptied the Foley by the bed by the window. And I was like, and then when the two of us were standing in the hallway and we like looked down the hallway and the fire doors were closed that night and they're heavy. So if somebody had walked through them, they'd still be moving.
Right.
And she just like, did that whole like Twilight Zone music thing. And, you know, nurse, she just like laughed and just walked away from me. And
Yeah.
She's like,
the
whatever,
next
Because we
morning,
hear it
and
all.
she was like, yeah, okay, like, I've got like 20 other patients I got to go to now. So then
Right.
she like was there back early the next morning. So now I worked at 6 in the morning. Her shift started at 7, so she was there at like 6:30. The woman had passed, and
Yeah.
I was able to talk to the daughter, and it was kind of a moment.
That
Yeah.
would be such a full circle if you could ever connect with her again, like to see if the daughter ever did realize who you became to be. Like, because at that point you were working as a phlebotomist, I wonder if she ever correlated that.
That story, no. I had another story that happened with where I was having to draw a typing cross on a patient that was going for surgery, and it was a heart surgery that she was going for, and it was a young kid. So when I went to go draw the blood, I psychically saw at the time, I know the tube colors might have changed, but at the time it was a blue top tube, which would have been a PTT to draw somebody's like levels of like what they could
Right.
Coumadin or heparin. So for me to see that, I was like, they want me to check that. So I actually drew
Oh,
the blood,
Oh, it wasn't
ran down to,
ordered, but you
it
went
wasn't
ahead and
ordered.
did it. Okay.
I drew the blood. I ran down to the laboratory. I added the blood as if it was added by the doctor. Then I ran to the hematology supervisor and I was like, this needs to be run stat. And she's like, I can't. I'm like, no, you have to. They're going for surgery. So she ran it stat. I took the blood work result, ran back up to the cardiothoracic surgical assistant. And I
Wow.
was like, I said, hey, Charlene, I think you need to look at this. And she looked at it and she went, she can't have surgery. She'll bleed out on the table. I
oh
was
my
like, oh,
gosh.
really? And she was like, yeah. And the surgery got canceled.
Wow.
So it became a little bit of an issue because nobody was really sure how it actually happened. And I kept my ass like, I kept my mouth completely shut. And then years later, I was doing a reading for someone, and that story came up in the reading. And I'm starting to give it to the person. I go, and then this happened, and they went, yeah, which is, by the way, very normal because I'll see a lot of my own personal experiences in order to convey a message. And
Mhm.
then I gave it like down to the specifics to who the doctor was and who the patient was. And the woman that I was reading went, oh my God, I heard you were good. She's like, but this is like off the hook. And I was like, I need, I'm like, I need to tell you that last part wasn't being psychic. And she goes, what? I go, I'm the one who did it. And she's like, what? I go, I'm the one who did it. And your daughter is telling me she's the one who told me to do it. And it happened to be the woman that I was reading daughter's friend.
Wow.
W-
Yep.
That's beyond coincidence. That's amazing.
Yeah, no,
Talk about a full circle moment there.
it
Like
was
just
kind of cool. That to me was one of those moments where I was like, wow, that's really awesome.
Yeah.
And
I'm,
thank
I'm
God I
sure you
is
listened.
had a lot of
amazing.
those. Wow. So, one question that I am dying to ask you, no pun intended. Why do Sorry, Jessica's going to spit out her
That was
soda.
funny. That was funny. That was a good one. I'm usually the comedian. Okay, go ahead.
I know.
Go
Every
ahead,
once in a
Erica.
rare while. Why is it that, because this is something that I have struggled with for a long time, why is it that some loved ones that have passed just don't seem to ever come through, no matter how open you are to it or need it, no matter how many psychic mediums you go to?
Right.
Why would that be?
I think it has to do. I think there's a lot of variables. One of the variables is that you had a good relationship with the person. And when you have a good relationship with a person, I think they're a little bit lazier. I mean, I say that like publicly all the time. Like, I think that they don't work as hard as where there were some issues or unresolved personal family dynamics that come in. Um, that's part one. Part two, it could be that it interferes on a lesson that we're still here trying to learn. I mean, I've got a number of people in my family that I've never heard from, and I do this. Like, I find it
Wow.
like fascinating that, like certain people don't show up. And then there's the subtlety of the reality of the work. And this is one of the things that I try to put out publicly as best as I possibly can. People in my field will make the connections that we make so much bigger and more powerful than they actually are, that it's next to impossible for a layperson who doesn't do this professionally to recognize the reality and how subtle the work actually is. So when you're doing something for a really long period of time, you guys would never in a million years stop to think about how to put an IV in. You know what I'm saying? It's just like
Right.
you just do it. It's what you do.
Right.
But for somebody who's never ever done that, for somebody who would have to do that for the first time and maybe read a book on how to put an IV in, it is a very uncomfortable journey and they don't know what they're doing. Right. So the more than likely, if they had to do it, they're going to miss and they're not going to be able to successfully do that. So I kind of feel like that, like when
Hmm.
people are watching mediums work, mediums will come sometimes and I can't say this without sounding like arrogant, but somebody who's not coming from the right
Go
ethics
for it.
and responsibility of
Yeah.
of teaching, who's making it about them, they don't take the time to explain to people, listen, I've been doing this work for a really long time. I always will tell people how long I'm doing it because I want them to understand I've been doing this a long time. So when you hear me say these things and do these things, I've got the experience behind it. But with that
Right.
experience, I bring an ethic and responsibility of teaching. And I always want people to recognize that you can have three sisters in the same family, lose the same dad, have amazing relationships with them, and dad may come through differently to all three sisters. And just because one gets a
Hmm.
dream and somebody else gets the song on the radio and somebody else finds pennies, that doesn't mean dad loves the one in the dream any more than the other. But when
Right.
somebody has a profound moment like a dream, it always feels like, oh my, that's way more of a connection than somebody getting the song lyrics or the scent or smell or seeing 1111 or having the connection to the cardinal or all the ABCs of connection that can take place. So they do come through. We just sometimes are so used to expecting it to be one way that we miss the
Yeah.
subtlety of the other ways that it actually happens.
That makes sense.
That's
It doesn't make it a lot easier, but it makes sense. And
Right. That's the
I
that's the real
appreciate that.
yeah, that's the real answer. Or I've had readings where I have 10 people on a Zoom group and let's say two or three of the people are related that are on there and their loved ones come through and they bring through family dynamics and inherently at the end of the night one of the people will say, well, is there anything for me because they didn't talk to me, they didn't say anything to me. And I'm
Right.
like, they kind of did. And they go, no, no, they talked about this and they talked about that and they validated that it was them, but they didn't say anything to me personally. And years ago, I would always take that as like, oh, I don't know, I have to juggle or I have to do something else. Like, what do I do to? And then I'd be like, no, now it is as much for you as it is hearing, and that is to let you know that there's a survival of consciousness, life and love are eternal, and they're still with you, and that is what's for you in this classroom of life. How great to know that they're just in the hallway, checking in from us from time to time while we're taking our life tests.
It is amazing. I like that
I just want to
analogy.
tell him this quickly. Yesterday, I told Erica this, and I, without giving up, information about whatnot, but I did write down like some stuff that if you did say it would mean a lot to me. I wrote it down, and I was watching one of your videos yesterday, and as I wrote that down, you were saying in one of your videos that you were reading somebody. You were saying exactly what I wrote down right after I freaking
Right.
wrote it down, which was nuts. I'm like, how is that possible? Like, how did I just write that down? And I was watching one and you said it. And I'm like, is it coincidence or is that?
Nope. That is their way of answering your request. Now, and this is what I tell clients. Anybody that's watching this, If you're going for an astrological reading, if you're going for a numerology reading, if you're going for a psychic reading, if you're going for a reading with a medium, you want to do just that, Jessica. You want to write down a list of questions or things that you're curious about, because what you're doing is you're projecting that out like the bat signal in the universe for the universe to answer. And it just doesn't come always in the way that you had expected.
Right.
So before there was a TV show and before people knew what I looked like, I just had this really weird but cool experience where people would walk into my office and they would look at me and they would get startled, like literally startled, like visibly startled. And the first couple times I was like, what? And then they would follow it up with, oh my God, you were in my dream. I was like, I was in your
Wow.
dream?
Oh,
And they'd be like,
wow.
yeah, you were in my dream. So then it got to the point where my smart ass side had to like play with it. So when people would do that, I'd be like, I was in your dream. And they'd go, yes. And then I would say, I handed you a phone. And they were like, yes. I go, and you were able to talk on the phone to your relatives in your dream. And they would nod like, yes. How did you do that? And I laughed and I go, I didn't do anything. I go,
Right.
your family used my face as a symbol so that when you saw me, it was a validation of
Right.
the experience that you had directly. But they used me to be the quote unquote middleman or the medium, knowing that
Yeah.
you were going to see me. So that's
Crazy.
exactly what you
Amazing.
had. Your family
Crazy.
just used the opportunity to get you to see in this case, a video, not a dream, that would answer the question. And there's
That
no
was your
greater gift than we can
validation.
give. Yep. There's no greater gift than we can give our loved ones and friends than not needing me. Like that is probably the most important thing I could tell people is like nobody needs a reading, but what people need is an understanding. And with an
Yeah.
understanding, we can work at being 50% of the equation of connecting with them.
I mean, it
Yeah.
wasn't like an hour later. Like I'm telling you, I wrote it and your video was playing in the background and then you said it. Like you were reading somebody else, but you said exactly what I wrote
Amazing.
down. It was crazy.
And that
Anyways,
happens in me. That happens to me when I'm doing my events. Like if I'm on tour and I'm actually reading for hundreds of people, I will get information for people in that room that will mirror something that's just happened in my own family.
Mm.
So I do the
yeah.
same thing. I go,
As a way of
okay,
helping you or your
yep,
family?
yep,
Oh,
as a way
interesting.
of helping me.
Because
Yep,
Wow.
you
we get
need
a
that too. I mean, I'm
of
sure
course.
that you miss your mom. Like I'm sure that you need those signs and stuff like that, you know?
I'm a little OCD, so I need a lot of validation, right? Like when I'm reading, somebody said to me at one of my events a few years back, I picked her for a question, and she goes, "I don't really have a question." She goes, "I just have a statement." And I always brace myself when somebody says they
Right.
have a statement
Right.
because
Oh
you
gosh.
know
You
that
never know.
that can, that can go either way, right? So I was like, "Oh,
Mm-hmm.
what's your statement?" She goes, "So you're like a needy medium," and I
What?
was like, because I don't consider myself a needy person at all. And I was like, what? She's like, well, I'm like watching you read. She goes, you force the people to come through to back up the information to make sure that it's them. She's like, don't you know that it's them? And I laughed and I go, well, I do know that it's them. I go, but I do like to validate in a room with a couple of hundred people that I'm with the right person. So
Yeah,
Sure.
I said,
right?
yeah. I go, okay, call me a needy medium. I'm a needy medium.
That's
I like
hilarious.
that. You should have a t-shirt that says that.
Yeah.
Needy medium.
John, I'm curious. Do you believe in karma? Do you think
I
karma's
do.
real?
I
It's
absolutely
something
do.
I
And so
struggle with because in my life personally, there have been so many people that, should have been the victim of some karma, let's just say, and seem to not only never be on the receiving end of any bad karma, but to almost be rewarded with these great lives. And I know, it's perception. You don't always know what people are going through, but it seems to be a reoccurring theme for me. So do you have any insight into that?
I can tell you that in the years of doing this, I have watched people in my field do things and have what would be perceived success in their arenas and whatever their fields are and go, I don't get it. Like, why aren't they
Yeah,
getting slammed? Like,
right. Me
that
too.
doesn't that doesn't make sense. Like, from a universal standpoint, like that's wrong. And that should be like they should be held accountable for that. And I had, again, another British medium, this guy, Robert Brown, say to me, and he just looked at me and he said, you never know how karma will actually reveal itself for the person. And it may not always happen on your timeline.
Yeah,
And I said,
true.
okay, but I have a Scorpio rising. Like, I want to see it. Like, I want to like know that it's happening.
Me too.
Somebody else said, recently said to me, yeah, they were like, wow, you're spiritual, but you're petty. I'm like, I'm not petty. I was like, I'm
I
just
love that.
honest. But if you see somebody doing something that is like not correct and not okay, one would wonder, well, why are they being allowed to continue to do that from a universal
Right.
standpoint? And I do believe that there's a bigger picture, and I do believe that people will be held accountable. I do believe that, and I do believe that it happens in a way where the most impact of that accountability happens. And sometimes the long leash that they're on for that is what we would perceive as being successful. But on a personal level, I can also say that some of those people have had some of the greatest falls in the years of me watching it. And here's little old me over here 4 decades later, just being like lone wolf, just doing my thing over here. So I always tell people never get concerned or overwhelmed by somebody else's perceived what they deserve. Because if we do that, like, here's my phrase. My phrase is this: may they get what they deserve, and may I be around to learn about it. That is my
Yes.
phrase. Because if they
Ooh,
deserve,
I'm
if
stealing
they
that.
deserve to, if they deserve to win the lottery, well, guess what? Let them freaking win. Um, but let them get what they deserve. So I know that on TikTok a few years back there was like a phrase that was going around where people would be like, "Have the day you deserve," and I'd be like, "The
Yeah.
day?" I'd be like,
Yeah.
"No, have the life have the life you deserve." Like,
Oh, that's
Right.
even
because if you
better.
yeah, because
Yeah.
if you're putting that out there, but the reality is those people already are on some levels. It's we just have a hard time looking at from the outside. Why would somebody not hold that behavior accountable? And you can look at it in
Exactly.
any field. I worked at a deli before I did anything else, and I remember like I worked my tail off. I was 13 years old and became the night manager of a deli.
Oh, wow.
Like I wasn't even like yeah, like I've been always like a hard worker. And I never understood why this one person who had the deli experience, who was there, who was like the golden boy of the building. Like, I did all the grunt work. Like I was doing all the stuff that he never had to do anything. Now, I would sit back and be like, what is like why is this happening? Like why
Yeah.
and this is a long time ago, and you could see I could still put myself in the
Right.
mindset of
Yeah.
going, I'm doing all of this, and he's just like sitting there in the back having coffee with the guy and getting paid.
And getting all the
Why
credit.
aren't you're like, but why aren't they letting him come out and do this? And I just sat
Right.
back and was like, all right, it is what it is, live and learn. And I did. I learned from that job. I learned from working in the video store. I learned from working in the hospital. I learned that it didn't matter that I was working in the hospital, which to me was very, very prestigious. And they were trying to, do whatever they could to be the best place that they possibly could be. But within that, there are humans, and humans make egotistical human judgments based upon, in some cases, their budget or their time off or their whatevers. So we have to just look at everything as where's the lesson? What am I supposed to learn from this? Because if you learn the lesson, then you can make choices to make sure that you don't have to be taking the test to relearn that lesson again.
Yeah.
That,
You mentioned
geez, I feel like
holding
I just had a whole
people
life lesson.
accountable, which just made me wonder, how do you reconcile religion? I know I didn't realize that you were raised particularly religious until Jessica was telling me, was it something that he said in
Wait, I
school?
wrote it down. He's a recovering Catholic.
I'm a
Yeah.
recovering Catholic. And I wrote a book on the rosary too. I wrote a book called Practical Praying because I felt like I was excommunicated from the church. And then, the universe puts us in these amazing opportunities. When I was taking I was in the healthcare world at the program that I was in, I was looking at the courses that you could take for electives, and one of the courses that they offered was witchcraft
Oh,
and
wow.
other blah 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 blah, and it was offered to only seniors. And I'm like, well, how do I not take that class? Like I have to get in that class.
Right.
So I told my counselor, I was like, I need to get in this class. And she said, no, it's for upperclassmen. And then I read her and she got me in the class. and and then
That's great.
I sat in that class, and the teacher walked in and he said, "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Theology 101." And I was like, "Theology?" It's like I barely wanted to go to CCD. Like I would never have taken theology. Like what am I sitting in theology? I'm in the wrong room.
Right.
Everybody felt like they were in the wrong room. At which point the professor said, "Listen, you should have continued reading what the course description was. It was like witchcraft and other theological pursuits, but nobody
Oh,
got past
wow.
witchcraft."
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I took a whole entire
Bait and
semester on the religions
switch.
of
Oh,
the world. Yep.
bait and switch.
Total eye opener for me because, nobody taught me in life about like Christianity and the amount of people that and bloodshed and wars that had taken place over the divine and God. That's not what they would teach you. So that part was swept under the rug. Or the fact that reincarnation was at one point part of Christianity, and then man took that out as a doctrine of a belief. Because if they think you can come back and do this again, well, therefore, we can't control you in this lifetime. Or John Calvin and Calvinism and the 99 whatevers and the Protestant Reformation. Like all of that stuff was eye opening for me, but important because it gave me a perspective from other people's perspectives coming at religion and how can they understand, justify, and rectify their belief system. So I came to the place where I said, listen, my job is to paint a portrait of energy. That's all I'm doing. How you frame that portrait in your
Right.
house on your wall, that's on you. I'm
Yeah.
not giving you a belief system. I just
Right.
want to let you know that outside of this physical body, we exist. There's a survival of love, and where there's love, there's connection.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I almost feel like the rosary is like, I mean, I grew up praying the rosary. I mean, that's just, you do, when you're Catholic, you do it. Our Father.
Well, I
But to
think
me,
you
the
have one
rosary
there
is
with
like,
you, don't you?
oh, yes, I do. Yeah, I told Erica that earlier. But to me, it's more like a meditation. Like if I it's
Exactly.
just it's something repetitive and it puts you like in a zone. You know what I mean? So like I'm kind of on the same, I think, thoughts that you are. Like Catholicism is so strict growing up Catholic, and the masses, and I mean I think you had to go to mass like daily for a while. I think I heard you say that. Yeah, I'm like, oh my
The
gosh.
look
Until
on
first
your
grade.
face when you're like, oh.
Yeah. Oh gosh. I personally don't go to mass anymore. I don't.
Same.
Yeah, I obviously I still believe in a higher power. I still will pray my rosary, but I do it in a different way now. It's not because you have to or you're going to go to
Same.
hell. It's because
Yep.
it connects me with my loved ones that have passed that really, have a fond admiration for the rosary, but it also just like it just puts me in a peaceful place sometimes. It's the only way I can
So
describe that.
one of the reasons why I actually wrote a book on the rosary is my publisher at the time had me on tour in Australia. And it was early in the morning and I was up and I got this like download of information that I needed to write a book about the rosary. And I literally sat there out loud and went, "No, I'm not doing that. Like, I'm not doing that. like that's not happening." And the reason why is I had spent such quality time putting distance between me and any type of religion that I didn't want anybody to feel alienated. If they
Right.
weren't Catholic, they couldn't connect with their loved ones, right? Because it doesn't
Right.
really matter what your denomination you are or lack of a denomination, you can still make a connection with energy. So my publisher called me maybe about a half hour later and said, can I come down to your room? I want to talk to you about your next book. And I was like, sure. Not even remotely thinking that he was going to say anything that I had just gotten in this like 2-second download. And he literally said, I think you should write a book on the rosary. I legit levitated out of my chair, like out of like,
Wow.
what? Like
Yeah, where did
it was
that
such
come
a
from?
yeah, it was like it was like he hit me in the face with it. And I was like, whoa. And I had to sit with that because now I was getting the validation of the
Mm-hmm.
message.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, yeah, I'll talk about it. I go, but can I ask you why? And he says, well, what do you do before you read? I said, well, I pray. He goes, well, what kind of prayer? And I go, well, I for years have prayed the rosary, but not like with the original intent, but with the intent of the repetition of prayer helps to raise vibration and it's more
Mm-hmm.
affirmative. He goes, well, then just write it from that perspective. So I said, yeah, okay, I'll think about it. And then
That's
I
crazy.
want
I
to
have
say,
never even read that book. I didn't even,
yeah,
I mean, I knew you had that book, but I didn't know what it was about. I haven't read it. But that's crazy that
yeah.
I'd say that. And that's essentially, I'm guessing what your book is about.
And then 2 weeks later, after that trip, a friend of mine who's a priest called me and he said, "Yeah, I got a message in prayer this morning." And I went, "What's the message?" And he goes, "Write the darn book."
Oh boy. You're like,
And
okay.
I just literally said to him, I go, "What book?" And he goes, "The book on the rosary." And again, I about jumped out of my body because
Wow.
he wasn't a part of any of these conversations. Like I would never say to my
Right.
friend who's the Catholic priest friend, "Hey, I'm thinking about writing a book on the rosary." You
Right.
know, like wasn't gonna happen. And then I did it, and I wrote it to express how I utilized it. And really, ultimately, save yourself the trouble. The reality of is it's just about repetitive affirmations and setting positive intentions and
I
putting your
honestly have
focus on
never
something.
even looked at what that book is about. Like, and I didn't realize I used the rosary in the, in the same way. That's nuts.
Guess what book Jessica's going to buy next?
Yeah, I know, right? Seriously. I know. I'm like, I have to read this now. I didn't even realize I was doing that. Like I don't know. I think some people are more um akin or more in tune to wanting to raise their frequencies versus other people just aren't open to it. You know, like if
Right,
I've always felt, not that I'm a medium in any way, but
right.
I've always felt like like with taking on people's energy and feelings and stuff. But I'm like, why do all these little coincidences and weird things happen to me? And then when I relay it to other people, they think I'm crazy. I'm like, is it because I'm just more open to it? Like, do you think that that's some people just have more of a belief system? Like with you going on tour, I take it, you know, right now you're on tour. I know you're going to New Jersey. I think you're like, where am I going? Next week, and then
I
Australia.
was like that in about 2 seconds. I was like, "Where am I going?"
Yeah, you have two shows in New Jersey, by the way. I could be your assistant. Um, and then to Australia. But do you ever get people that you'll read them, but they're just shut down? Like you try to give them messages that are coming through, but they don't want to validate it because either A, they're not open to what you're saying, or B, they're just so skeptical that they can't even hear the message or hear what's coming through. Does that make
So
sense what I'm asking?
that is so spot on for the last week that I just had in one of
Mm,
the events that I just did. Um, there's a lot of energy that you have to actually sometimes break through in order to get somebody to pay attention. So if somebody's coming for a reading, and this is an old story, but I had a waiting list that was like over 8 years long at one point, and this
wow.
woman was on it. And when she finally got in front of me, she sat in front of me. It was like 6:30, 7 o'clock at night. I gave her a pass because it could have been traffic. It could have been she didn't know where she was coming from. You know, she had traveled in for it. And there was a lot of huffing and puffing and angst and frazzled energy. And I sat down and I said, are you okay? And she said, "Yeah, I'm fine." I was like, okay, her energy was not fine.
Oh boy.
And then I gave her I gave her my big speech, and then I started giving information, and like Wonder Woman with the bullet bracelets, you know, it was like my words were the bullets, and she was like ching 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 ching. And then I finally just looked at her and I said, "Well, I think we're done here." And all of a sudden she said, wait, what?" And I went, "Yeah," I said, I think we're done. I don't think I'm the right person for you." And she said, "I've waited 7 years for this." And I literally looked at him and I was like,
I'm
"Well, then you should
sorry.
act like you waited 7 years for this." And she
Right.
like looked
Yeah.
at me and I said, "No, I'm serious. Like you should act like you waited 7 years. You're acting like I'm the reason why your loved ones passed. You're coming at me
Mm,
with energy as opposed to allowing me to facilitate it." And then she
mm,
dropped her guard and she had a great session. But there were those moments. And then there were moments where I think the details or the specifics that I can come through with make people very myopic and they get very annoyed by the fact that they're not hearing the what I call the fluffy stuff. You know,
mm,
oh, they love you and they're sitting with you and they're
Yeah.
smiling and they're happy and you know,
right.
when you see a butterfly, that's them and they know that they're like a lot of people just want that. And I have to say like I am not the right person for you. Like
Yeah.
like I don't care if people like me, but
Because
you're
the
going to listen.
message is often just that they are there, that their loved one is still there. And then they just give you some way to validate that to them. But there is no other
Right.
touchy
Multiple ways.
feely.
Well, no, the touchy-feely is the fact that they're there. Like the
Yeah.
connection and the love is to reinforce that. But like I don't ever want to foster a dependency on me or the subject matter. I want to inspire somebody to recognize that they know that there's an afterlife, that they know there's a place that their loved ones and friends go, that we will be reunited again, and how great to know that we can have that connection. The problem comes in is people want what they want, and we live in a fast food society, like where you want to pull up to the drive-through window and order the number two and supersize that with grandma. That's not how this works, right? It's not going to happen like that. It happens in the way that it
Yeah.
needs to, with facts and information, not always emotion. But you guys are on TikTok. You guys see what's on there. If you see psychics on there, watch the level of BS that you will
Yes.
see. You
Yeah.
can't have 1,000 people in a live and go, "Does somebody here know John?"
Right.
It's like you know,
Right.
it's
Yeah.
just
Someone's
you
going to
can't.
know
There's
John. Yeah.
Has anyone had
right,
somebody pass in September? Anybody, right? Not for a room
but like
for 10,000 people.
no. So like when I'm reading for somebody, like I will tell them right up front, like here are the things I'm not talking about. I'm not talking about your cardinals, your butterflies, your hummingbirds, finding pennies, dimes, and quarters, seeing 11, 11, 2, 2, 2. I go through the litany of all the things that are real,
Yeah.
but you don't
Yeah.
need me for that. You need me to take it to the next level. Let's get into what's a lesson that you're supposed to be learning that maybe your loved ones and friends want to come through talking about. Like what's a it's not always what people want, but I think it's
Yeah.
always what they need.
Did you have,
I
Erica, you
had
had another question for go ahead.
yeah, it's kind of a tough subject matter, but working in hospice and in particular peds
Sure.
hospice, I've always been curious when a young child passes and they are still there, their energy with their parents or their family, do they stay at that maturity level forever? You know?
I love that question.
So you actually you're yes, because you're diving into an energy that's very different than what people would ask normally. Normally, they would say, are they the same age? So if somebody passed at the age of 10 and it's 10 years later and they get read, that child can come through as a 10-year-old or that child can come through as a 20-year-old and
Oh,
age
Oh,
them on a calendar. But
interesting.
the beauty of hospice, the wonder of hospice and palliative care, my mom was a recipient of that. So I have firsthand experience with that world and what that was like. Um, and the level of what I think angels on earth helping people to labor to leave. And I always say to folks, we labor to come into this world, we labor to leave. And there's a lot of similarities in ways that people don't see. When you're in utero, you have 9 months of being nurtured and taken care of in a warm, loving environment. But then something traumatic happens to you in that environment where you are forced to evacuate an environment that you're nurtured and loved in. You usually go through a tunnel, birth canal. You're met by a bright white light and received by family that's very excited to see you. Well, death is just like that. We are in a world where we're nurtured and we're loved. And then at a certain point, we're going to labor to leave, where we also go through a tunnel. And that tunnel is the soul leaving the body, where we meet up with loved ones and friends who are very excited to see us again. So, birth and
Wow.
death have a very similar transformative place from being safe to feeling unsafe to feeling loved. But when that energy passes, it's passing and being met by those who've gone on before them, which is also for folks that are listening to this. If you were not able to be at the bedside with someone when they passes, if somebody passed and they passed during COVID where you weren't allowed to be at the bedside,
Right.
or if you come
yeah.
from a toxic family where they kept you from your loved one,
Yeah.
please know that nobody ever passes alone and nobody is ever alone when they're transitioning. Even if nobody's in the room physically with them, there are always loved ones and friends that are kind of cheering them on, like they're on the side of the road, doing the final run of the
I
the
love that.
race. Like they're there to be there and celebrate with them. So never feel like, oh my God, I wasn't there. I mean, honor the I wasn't there from a earthly grief standpoint, but no,
Right.
from an energetic standpoint, they're never going to come back and be like, where the hell were you? I waited for 2.5 days, and then I had to go. They don't really come through with that. They come through with appreciation, gratitude, and love.
Do
Well,
you think
in
sometimes though that
hospice,
they know it's
oh, go
better
ahead.
though, like they know it's the patient, the person dying knows it would be better for my child to not see me. So a lot of times maybe
Yeah.
they
We
will
see that
themselves,
all the time in
to die
hospice, all the
at a
time.
time that
Oh
their
yeah.
family isn't there or is there, vice versa, you know?
Yeah, I call that making it a run for it, right? And I tell my clients all the time, I'm like, if you talk to anybody that's in critical care work, anybody
Mhm.
that's
Yeah.
critical ICU, CCU,
Yep.
med surge step down where there's like a critical recovery period or hospice or palliative care, there's like an unspoken code, which is, hey, why don't you go stretch your legs?
Why don't you
Why
go
why
get
don't
some
you go grab a
coffee?
coffee? Why
Yep.
don't you go get some coffee? Because that gives the person who's going to be transitioning the opportunity and space to actually pass, because they
Mhm.
may not be able to pass when the unspoken energy is going, please don't leave me, please don't leave me, please
Yeah.
don't leave me, please don't go, please don't leave me, please don't leave me.
Right.
So
And then we see the opposite where they will defy medical odds and just hang on for seemingly
Yeah.
long periods of time until someone important arrives that they're
yep,
waiting for. We
and
see
then they'll
that.
finally go,
Yeah.
and then
And then
they'll
very
finally
quickly.
go.
Yeah. It's amazing. But we see that all the time in hospice. Yeah. So, John, you
But
recently came out with a new app, I'm told. Can you
I
tell us
Yes.
a
did.
little bit about the Evolve Plus TV app?
So the Evolve Plus TV, it's evolveplus.tv. It is a place, it is a community where people can create their own profile. And then we have different groups and channels. So there's a group called Circles that's informative. I have my own channel and a group that's there. So I'll go live and do readings there. And then we have a group called The Journey that's head up by a woman named Diane Gray. And she is a death doula, and she deals with a lot of
Oh, wow.
grief and on death and dying on her live streams that she does there. And then we have a channel called The Orbit and a group that matches it, where we have a weekly cosmic podcast on the astrological weather. So every week there's an astrologer that's doing a podcast named Lisa Salvatore. My daughter Olivia hosts that because she understands astrology. So they have this
Okay,
weekly
cool.
thing that they do. But we have astrologers, numerologists. We're doing meditation, and it's growing exponentially. So we're excited about 2024 and what we're doing with that. But I wanted to create a safe space for the subject matter where people would not be scammed by all the knockoffs that are out there. Like all the I have like over 150 John Edward accounts on TikTok that are not
Yeah,
me,
it's
but
ridiculous.
they clone the content. Same thing with Instagram. So I'm not a fan. I used to love Twitter for entertainment, fun, reasons. I'm not on Twitter or X. I call it Twix now. Twix. I'm not on Twix. Instagram I don't really go on. TikTok I will do because I like
Yeah, I
that's how we
see
met
you on
Erica, right?
there. Yes.
Yep. We met via TikTok, uh and the only reason why I actually went on TikTok was because I saw a woman doing a live and I thought it was a parody. I
Oh
legitimately
my
thought this
gosh.
was like a skit making fun of the subject matter,
Oh,
and then realized that
another
she was
psychic?
serious.
Or trying to be.
We'll call her that. Yeah. We'll
Wannabe.
call her that.
Wow.
But I remember
Are-
it was like 2 o'clock in the morning. I was like, this woman's gonna make me get out of bed right now and turn the camera on me. Like it was that bad. It was really, really bad.
Well, we appreciate
Yeah,
that you're on
should have joined her
TikTok.
live. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
can
we
you
do appreciate
imagine
it.
as another
Yeah, can you
psychic
imagine him
medium having
popping in?
just, hi, it's me, John. Just dropping in.
Let me show you how it really goes. Yeah.
Yeah,
That would
wait,
be
this is
great.
BS. Like this woman's totally full of it. You guys should just not be here. Like,
Get off.
Do you have opinions that you would be willing to share about other well-known psychics? Maybe some that you have great respect for,
sure,
or is
I
that a
have a I
taboo subject?
I will tell you who I respect in the field. I respect a woman by the name of Char Margolis because she's been doing this for a very, very, very long time. Robert Brown is a person that I talked about from London. I have a great respect for him. Um, and respect and acknowledging someone's abilities are two different things. There are people that I know are really good at what they do, but I don't respect them because of how they
Yeah,
choose to use it.
I get
So
Okay.
that.
there's differences that come up there. I think one of the people that have been one of the most clearest instruments doing this work is a gentleman by the name of George Anderson. And then there's Jonathan Lewis, who's also on TikTok, who I helped mentor. So like clearly him.
Oh, that's
There's
one
a
I
number
need
of
to
people, and
follow.
then in different fields, there are different people, so different modalities. So what I've done is the people that I resonate with, I've invited them to become verified creators on the Evolve Plus TV app,
Okay.
so that folks, when I go, this is who I would recommend, I just go to the go to the
That's
creators
so
go to the
smart.
creators channel and just pick who you feel like you're resonating with. So
Yeah.
yeah, because I've been doing this for so long that like I've met people that I go, they're really good, but I don't really like how they're doing it. And that's just a me thing. It's,
Yeah.
some people would say there's nothing wrong with what they're doing, but I
Right.
don't think I don't think certain things are okay, because I have an old school mentality when it comes to
Yeah.
how do we treat the client
I
and
get
what's our
that as a
role.
nurse. There are nurses that patients and families think are amazing, and I'm like, mm-mm, mm-mm, you know.
Well,
But that's your
somebody's
area of
amazing
expertise.
person, right? But somebody's amazing personality is one thing, but that
Right.
personality might translate to being technically trained correctly.
Correct. Yeah, they tend to love the cheerleaders, the very happy, peppy nurses, and nothing wrong with that, but that's not really the goal. The goal is safe
Right,
patient care and the ability to advocate and get you what you need, right? But
right.
don't even get me started on that.
Yeah, that's a whole nother podcast. If they wanted to
Yeah.
find you on tour, they could go to your website, correct, which is johnedward.net, to see what tour dates you have
Correct.
coming up and
Correct.
And I really
anything like that.
recommend going to a live show. I've been to one and it was a phenomenal experience. So
Well,
if you're
thank
thinking
you.
about going, please do.
Yeah,
And then
I
Thank
want
where
to
do
you.
have to
they
check one
find
out.
your app? Just in the App Store, I imagine?
Yeah, they can go to evolveplus.tv, and you'll see the logo. It looks like this. It's like a
A
cookie with a bite
cookie?
out of it.
Like a
Yeah, it's
That's
Saturn
a
cute.
cookie.
cookie?
It is a Saturn cookie. Yep.
What's the meaning of that?
So the first TV show that I did was called Crossing Over, and when it debuted on the Sci-Fi Channel, and the Sci-Fi Channel's
Yes, I
logo was the
remember.
Saturn.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I happen to love chocolate chip cookies. So I thought I'm gonna blend both my worlds, the cookie and the Saturn, and this is like a new media like opportunity because I get a chance to go live on here. And when we do the Jersey events, we're actually filming them as TV shows. So we're
Oh,
going
cool.
to create shows that'll air on Evol Plus, and plus there's like I'm going after all of my books and the rights to my products again, and that is going to be also an added value. So when people go to my channel, there's like there's a psychic development workshop that's being released episodically. That's like we're coming up on the fourth lesson, but all of that together was like a $1,200 value. It's on there, part of the membership. I'm getting my books back. All of those add up. That's going to be on the. I'm
Okay.
creating a hub of where all my products can
Yeah.
exist. So I'm going after the one by one because it's such a weird world out there, and people would look for like a book I wrote on development called Infinite Quest, but they were selling it on Amazon for like $200 a copy. So it's either like you can't get the book and it's $200 a copy on Amazon, or there are books that were being sold for a quarter in like some other place. I'm like,
Oh my
okay,
gosh.
this is just crazy. Yeah, like because I don't have a TV show, so I'm not out there in the way media wise like I once was. So it's now a good time for me to pull those children home. They're coming home and they're living on the app.
Well, you have such a vast array of experience with your lifetime of doing this that it would be hard to get it all organized like that. So I think this is going to be great for you. You mentioned your daughter earlier, and I just wanted to say I think you must be such a proud father because did I hear that she was going into the acting world and your
She's
son
in it.
was in the medical world?
Yeah, my son is a first year med student.
I knew it. Yeah, I told you,
Um,
Erica. Yeah.
yep, he's a
Yeah.
first year med student, and he
Amazing.
is actually working at the hospital that I used to work at. So it's really
Oh,
kind of crazy.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so he's doing that. He's working in, as they now call it, the ED, which I can't get used to. I just
I
think
know. I know,
my
right?
brain,
It's still the ER. Yeah.
it's
Right.
ER in my head,
Yeah.
because ED has a whole different connotation to me. So
Right?
Right? That's the
I was
ED
like,
that we
I was
know
like,
about.
When somebody said to me that they worked in the ED, I was like, that's
You're
a
like,
department now?
Yeah, they have a whole
That's a
department
whole
dedicated.
department for that?
It's a whole specialty.
It's a pandemic now. Everybody's falling down, literally.
I believe that would be a peen-demic.
Oh my gosh, the jokes are getting better and better. Oh my
amazing.
God, that's great.
I love healthcare humor. That's a given.
Well, we
So-
have a
Well,
wicked
it's sick
sense of
and
humor.
twisted, you know,
Yeah.
and it's not meant for the outside non-medical world, right? Like only
Yeah.
only
'cause-
we get it. Yeah. But it's a
That's why
coping
a
mechanism.
lot of people get mad at me. You know that, Erica, because the people that aren't in healthcare hear my skits and they're like, "How could you say that?" You
That's
know,
so
but I'm like,
offensive.
"You're not my target audience, honey." Sorry.
I know, but people like to be offended.
Yeah,
Yes.
Yeah,
That's
do.
true.
They like to be offended.
Erica
Yeah.
pisses everybody off, don't you, Erica?
I do. She's making a
Constantly.
t-shirt saying it's Nurse Erica's fault because everything gets
Yeah,
blamed
everyone
on
always
me.
blames her. In nursing, they just blame Erica.
Anything
Yeah.
that
It's your
happens
fault,
in
Erica.
nursing, it's my fault. Yeah. Frustrating as all
Pre-
that.
Pretty much, yeah.
Well, just remember, every field has ego. So
Yes.
Oh yeah,
And it's
That's for
definitely
sure.
in the medical field for sure.
that don't go
Yeah.
away. Nope.
Any
Darn, yeah.
upcoming predictions for healthcare other than what you had said at
Oh,
the
yeah,
beginning of
let's hear it.
2023? Any advice for nurses? Anything along those lines? Because we're still struggling.
I just think the same thing that I said earlier. I think that people have to recognize the backbone of a healthcare industry is nursing. Like,
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I've
for saying
seen it firsthand. Like, I've watched it and witnessed it firsthand, like what they do and how they do what they do. And doctors are amazing and they spend quality time doing what they do. But the facilitators of those orders and those needs and the catching of the mistakes, all of that goes into giving those doctors that respect. I've been in the rooms. I've watched it happen,
Mhm.
where somebody says, excuse me, so and so, but did you mean this or this?
Mhm.
And the patient wouldn't know that,
Right.
but when the doctor's like, oh yes, that,
Uh-huh.
and they've got 4,000 patients of themselves that they have to go through. I feel bad for doctors in a whole different other field because medicine has been so corporatized that
Yes, it
Yes.
has.
having a doctor actually spend quality time with a patient is unheard of because they're
Mhm.
giving you,
It's impossible.
2.11 seconds in order to do your HNP with the person. So how are you really getting into, history and physical for those that don't know what that is, but like,
Yeah.
how are you getting into a patient's actual issues?
Right.
So it's just really, it's an interesting time when it comes to health, but yet, telehealth clinics are popping up everywhere.
Mhm.
So I'm like,
Everywhere. Yes.
and I'm like, I'm not so comfortable with that. Like, 'cause
No.
how do you build up a trust and a relationship with someone? There's
Well,
a
and how do you
response.
really examine someone? Yeah, some things are okay. You can report your symptoms, but how are you looking in someone's throat? How are you looking in someone's ear? You're just going to prescribe something based off my list of symptoms without actually examining
Yeah,
me. It's
such a
so
disconnect.
strange.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I'm still the person that's out here, with mitigating COVID precautions. Like when I walk onto stage, the only time that people will see me not being what would be perceived as being safe would be me on stage. Me on stage, I'm legitimately like I walk out with a mask because I want people to see me wearing it.
Mm-hmm.
I take the mask off on stage, and then by the way, on the stage there are actually 3 filters that are happening with a CO2 monitor on every stage
Nice.
that I'm actually
Nice.
speaking in front of. And then I use Enovit spray before and after my actual
Wow.
events.
Good
And
for
I
you.
am still double masking on planes, and
I am
I
too,
want
and I feel like I'm the only one. I've been traveling quite a bit lately, and I'm one of maybe 2 people on a plane wearing a mask. It's so frustrating.
yeah, and I just I always go back to like this one image that I was shown at the very beginning of the pandemic. And that was coming out of a restaurant in Manhattan, and about 16, 20 feet in front of us was somebody who was vaping. And that vape cloud was pretty big.
Oh gosh.
And when it blew back towards us, and we
Mm,
had just eaten dinner. And I'm like, ew, I
yeah.
can taste grape,
Ew.
which meant that like
Uh,
I feel
ew.
like, not to be gross, guys, but like I feel like I just like licked his lung. That image never left my mind because that's what they showed me COVID was. They equated COVID right from day one to a vape cloud. So when everybody was like, it's not airborne, I had everybody around me. I'm like, this shit is airborne.
Absolutely.
Wear your freaking mask. Wear your mask. But I practice universal precautions when I worked in healthcare. I practice universal metaphysical precautions in everyday life. So I'm always going to protect my energetic self as well as my physical self. So before there was a pandemic, I was the Lysol wipe guy cleaning the plane because people are nasty.
Me
they
too.
are nasty, and they don't clean those planes the way they should.
They
don't. They're turning them over so
minutes.
fast.
No, they do not.
And
There's
now you get on planes and you see trash
Ooh.
left from the previous. Like, they're not cleaning. Come on, they're not disinfecting. No, I know. It's so gross.
We have to be our own patient advocate. And that's for everything. We have to be our own patient advocate. If we're in the hospital, we have to be our own patient advocate when it comes to your own, health. I'm of the mindset, and I know that I'm coming from a place of I worked in a hospital. So when somebody had to have their blood, drawn and they were being trained, we would have our bloods done and we would have baseline testing. But I got used to that. And I got used to the fact that having baselines are really, really important. So whether I have a baseline of my blood work or I went for a pre-nuvo scan in January of this year to do a full body MRI, I think it's important for us to know ourselves, like know your body, and don't let the fear of what may be something stop you from finding out what that is. So I think being your own patient advocate in the world that we're still living in is you need to mitigate when it comes to COVID. And so many people want things to go back to normal, and they're just not going to until people take that part of their health seriously.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Thank you so much, John.
No,
thank you for
Thanks
taking the time to meet with us today and for imparting not just your abilities, but your wisdom with us. We truly appreciate it.
And Jessica, you got to come to an event. Let me know what area you're in.
Yeah.
I would love to. I would absolutely love to.
She's in Florida.
I'm in Florida. So I don't know if you
next time I'm there. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any more Vegas shows on the horizon?
No, I haven't been there in a while. I was just invited though to come back. So I think that that eventually will happen. I have to find out where that'll be though. Uncertain.
Please let me know if you do, because
I
will
be there. You do a lot of Australia stuff, don't you? Like, it seems like it.
A lot.
I do. I do a lot of Australia.
Like it, or is it just
both?
Okay.
Yeah, I like it, and they're pretty amazing. It's a pretty amazing country.
Accents are amazing. I love an Australian accent.
I will leave you guys with this. Every year that I went there, I always wanted to be there at the end of the year because when I came back, it was hard to read. It was hard to read in the States because the level of community that they have as a country is really awesome to feel. And I'll leave you with this. I woke up once and I was there, and somebody in Perth, which is like the California of Australia, I was in Sydney, said, "Hey, mate, I know I'm not going to be able to get to see you in Perth. I know you're going to be in Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, and Perth this year. Have a great tour." And I'm like,
wow,
that's so nice.
Yeah.
It's like they cared that I was actually in the country. And I think that they care about everybody in the same kind of way. So I think it's nice. Because if U2 is, performing in Miami, nobody in Seattle cares. Like nobody in Seattle cares if they're performing in Miami. They're going to care when they're coming closer to where they are. So I think that's kind of cool. It's a good bunch of people.
I have never been, but it's on my bucket list.
Thank you, John.
Thank you so much. We appreciate you. Keep doing your good work.
Talk soon.
Thank you.
Guys.
Bye.
Bye.